What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Epictetus. And think of this: in the next 3 minutes, you'll understand why Marcus chose silence over arguing. Imagine the quiet Roman courtyards, candlelight flickering against marble columns, the faint voices of soldiers on the street outside. Picture yourself walking slowly, scroll in hand, hearing the words of the Stoics echoing through time. They whisper a truth you might not endure. You cannot control another's tongue, but you can master your own. And this mastery begins with knowing when not to speak. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. To understand this better, let's go back to an ancient lesson from Marcus Aurelius, who once noted that anger is like holding a burning coal. You scorch your own hand before it touches another. You remember the last time you felt anger surge in your chest. Maybe it was a cruel word, maybe betrayal, or simply someone cutting you off in traffic. Your instinct was to lash out, to correct the wrong with your voice, with fire in your tone. But you also recall how much energy it cost, how empty you felt afterwards. This is where the Stoics guide you to silence. They remind you that anger is not the enemy outside, it is the fire inside that consumes your calm. Marcus Aurelius, despite commanding legions and ruling an empire, faced constant provocation. Senators plotted, generals resisted, even his own son Commodus would one day disgrace the family name. Yet the Meditations rarely record him cursing others. Instead, he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In silence, he resisted the temptation to mirror the cruelty of those around him. You see that silence is not weakness, it is strategy. By not feeding anger with words, you rob it of oxygen. And you notice in your own daily life that silence at the height of fury feels impossible. Scholars still debate, is it more stoic to suppress anger completely, or to acknowledge it and then redirect it? Some say Epictetus advocated pure restraint, a firm wall against rage. Others argue Seneca's writings on anger suggest a gentler approach, recognition then release. But both paths converge on one lesson: speech in anger is rarely wise. Imagine a Roman soldier insulted by his commander in front of the legion. If he shouts back, he loses face, maybe even his life. If he endures in silence, his dignity remains intact, and time reveals his steadiness. You too carry that same choice into every quarrel. So you breathe. You let the flame rise without giving it fuel. And in the stillness, something remarkable happens. The other person begins to expose themselves. Their words echo louder because yours are absent. Their fury seems almost absurd when weighed against your calm. This is karma at work, not in a mystical sense, but in the natural order of cause and effect. Their anger hangs in the air unanswered until it begins to recoil back upon them. In that quiet space, you gain control, not of them, but of you. Your silence becomes a fortress, and you realize you need no sharp words to defend it. The next time you feel your blood rush, recall Marcus walking the streets of Rome at dusk, whispering to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And with that, you step into silence, not as retreat, but as mastery. For every moment you hold your tongue, when anger surges, you carve a deeper path of freedom inside yourself. Section 2. You recall the sting of an insult, the way it seems to cut into your pride, demanding that you respond. The impulse rises swiftly to defend yourself, to strike back with sharper words, to reclaim your dignity. But the Stoics warn you, your dignity is not something others can steal. It lives where your silence begins. Epictetus once told his students, If someone speaks badly of you, remember he is only describing his own perception. You sit with this thought, realizing that words spoken against you are not carved in stone, but drift like smoke. They only burn if you chase them with your breath. Imagine Marcus Aurelius in the Senate chamber, surrounded by men who whispered about his supposed weakness, who doubted his ability to hold Rome together while plague swept through the empire. If he had stood up each time to counter every insult, he would have wasted his reign defending shadows. Instead, his writings show restraint, as if he were conversing not with them, but with his own soul. If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, I'll gladly change, for I seek the truth which never harmed anyone. Silence was not surrender. It was confidence that truth needs no noise to endure. You notice this truth in modern life as well. When someone mocks you in public, hoping to provoke a reaction, silence leaves them suspended. They expected a duel. Instead, they find an empty stage. Their own cruelty echoes, and others see it for what it is. In this way, silence becomes not weakness, but exposure. Scholars debate whether silence in the face of insult is always wise. Some argue that Stoicism can be misused, that enduring every slight without response could invite injustice. Others insist that most insults are too petty to deserve your attention. The common thread: you must distinguish between defending principle and defending ego. The first may demand speech, the second rarely does. Think of a Roman soldier again, mocked by comrades for scars or failures. If he laughs with them or says nothing, the insult passes like dust in the wind. But if he flares up, insisting on his honor, the laughter grows. You see how silence can carry the weight of unshakable dignity. You reflect on your own life, those moments when you bit back your reply, when you felt your chest tighten but chose not to speak. At first, the silence felt heavy, as though you had lost something. But later you realized you had lost nothing at all, except the regret you would have carried if you had spoken in haste. Karma here is subtle. The one who insults expects satisfaction, expects you to dance in their fire. When you refuse, their words fall flat and the balance shifts. They are left holding the sharp edge they forged, and it cuts their own hand. This is not mystical revenge. It is the natural collapse of cruelty when it meets the wall of indifference. Marcus knew this. He walked the palaces and barracks of Rome, aware that whispers swirled like dust. He did not silence them with decrees or punishments. Instead, he wrote quietly to himself, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." You realize now your response is not measured in words, but in your own life lived well. So you begin to practice this. When insulted, you breathe once, and instead of answering, you imagine laying a stone on a silent wall. Each insult becomes another stone, until soon you have built something unshakable, a fortress not of anger, but of dignity. Silence is your mortar. Patience is your strength. And as you sit in that stillness, you feel it, your dignity intact, untouched by any word another could hurl. Section 3. You overhear the low hum of voices circling like bees, carrying fragments of other people's lives. Gossip has a way of drawing you in. Its flavor is tempting, like sweet wine passed around the table. Yet the Stoics remind you that what tastes sweet in the mouth can sour in the stomach. Gossip is one such poison, and silence is the antidote. Epictetus warned his students often about idle talk. He said, "Be silent for the most part, or if you speak, say only what is necessary and in few words." You understand now that gossip is not necessary. It adds nothing to your own virtue, and it slowly corrodes the character of those who trade in it. Imagine the bustling streets of ancient Rome, merchants shouting their wares, senators whispering about alliances, servants trading stories in hidden corners. Gossip was as common then as it is now, but Marcus Aurelius urged himself not to waste breath on it. "Do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others," he wrote, meaning not to lose yourself in their flaws, their mistakes, their private affairs. For a man ruling an empire, every word mattered. To indulge in gossip would have been beneath him a theft of his own time. You see how the same truth applies in your world today. When a colleague invites you into a hushed conversation about someone's failure, or when the glow of your phone tempts you with endless streams of rumor, your silence becomes a shield. You refuse to add fuel, and in refusing, you show strength. The gossip may circle, but you do not add your voice to its storm. Scholars sometimes ask, did Stoics believe total withdrawal from social life was required? Some argue that too much silence can appear as pride or distance. Others insist that Stoics valued community, but only when rooted in truth. The middle path reveals itself: you remain engaged, but without indulging in the weakness of rumor. Your silence here is not isolation, it is integrity. Picture a Roman centurion listening to his men whisper about a failed campaign. If he joins, he lowers himself. If he corrects them with anger, he risks more rebellion. But if he remains silent, carrying himself with steady discipline, the whispers eventually die in the face of his unshaken composure. His silence is louder than their words. You reflect on your own experiences, those times when gossip pulled you in, when you repeated something because you thought it harmless. Later, you realized it had sown discord, and you felt a quiet shame. Contrast that with the times you stayed silent, perhaps even walked away. In those moments, you carried yourself higher, and others noticed even if they said nothing. This is where karma reveals itself. The gossipers, hungry for attention, end up tangled in the same rumors they spread. Their words turn back, and reputations crumble not because of your defense, but because the truth inevitably surfaces. Meanwhile, your silence leaves you untouched. You let time expose what needs exposing. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the solitude of his tent during war, reminded himself, "It is not what they say, but what you do that matters." You hear these words in your mind as you resist the pull of idle talk. Silence is your answer, not because you fear speaking, but because your voice is too valuable to be wasted on shadows. So the next time gossip circles around you, you breathe deeply and you let it pass. Your silence is not emptiness, it is fullness filled with strength and clarity. By refusing to feed the noise, you rise above it, like the quiet figure of Marcus in his study, writing not about others, but about how to master himself. And in that choice, you understand your silence is not withdrawal from life. It is your way of protecting it. Section 4. There comes a moment when you realize that truth, like the sun, does not need your defense. It shines with or without your words. Yet you have felt the urge many times. Someone challenges your beliefs, misrepresents your actions, or distorts what you know to be real, and you want to argue until they yield. But the Stoics remind you, truth does not tremble under attack. It waits silent while falsehood exhausts itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can show me my error and prove me wrong, I will gladly change. For I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception. You pause at that thought. When you know the truth, it is not threatened by opposition. What is threatened is only your ego, and that does not deserve your endless defense. Imagine Marcus in council, surrounded by advisors who disagreed, some out of principle, others out of envy. If he argued each point, if he sought to conquer them with words, he would drown in endless debate. Instead, he trusted in the weight of what was real. Rome's laws, Rome's victories, Rome's survival, these spoke louder than any reply he could give. His silence was not weakness. It was certainty. You see this mirrored in your life today. Someone questions your character, accuses you unfairly, or doubts your capabilities. You feel the rise of words in your throat, ready to prove yourself. But you remember proof does not come from speech, it comes from action. By remaining silent, you give space for reality to unfold. Soon your consistency, your effort, your integrity will reveal the truth more clearly than any argument. Philosophers still debate whether silence is always the right response. Some argue that truth must be defended, lest lies spread unchecked. Others counter that falsehood is self-defeating, collapsing under its own weight. The Stoic path threads between the two. Speak when justice demands, but hold your tongue when only ego seeks vindication. The difference is subtle but essential. Picture a Roman senator slandered in whispers, accused of corruption, though he had lived simply. If he responds angrily, the whispers grow stronger. If he protests endlessly, people assume guilt. But if he remains silent and his life remains clean, the slander fades. His actions outweigh their words. The silence itself becomes testimony. You remember times when you over-explained yourself, hoping others would believe you. Instead, your words made you sound guilty, uncertain, even though you were innocent. Contrast that with moments when you let your work, your patience, your presence answer for you. The difference is stark. Silence in the presence of truth holds far more weight than speech. Here, karma works not as a mystical punishment, but as the natural unfolding of reality. Lies cannot endure forever. Those who spread them are revealed by the emptiness of their own lives. You need not fight them with noise. Time itself becomes your ally, delivering balance without your interference. Marcus, sitting in his tent with the weight of empire pressing down, whispered to himself, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do." You take these words into your own silence. They remind you that truth does not vanish when unspoken. It deepens like roots growing unseen beneath the soil. So when you face doubt or false accusation, you breathe. You choose not to defend every word, not to chase every shadow. Your silence holds the truth steady, waiting for time to reveal it. And in that quiet, you find freedom, the kind Marcus himself carried through years of turmoil. Section 5. There are moments when words themselves become weapons, not yours, but those of another who seeks to twist and bend them. You sense it in the subtle traps of manipulation, a question designed not to seek truth, but to ensnare, a flattering phrase meant to lower your guard, a clever argument crafted only to gain control. In such moments, silence is not retreat. It is defense sharper than any blade. Epictetus warned his students to guard their reason as a fortress. When you are invited to speak, be cautious, for many are laying snares. He understood that some people do not desire wisdom but conquest. They wish to bend your words into chains. You see this clearly now. If you speak too quickly, you give them material to twist. But if you remain silent, you starve their tactics of power. Imagine the Roman court filled with ambitious men eager to rise. They would flatter emperors, promise loyalty, then whisper betrayal behind marble pillars. Marcus Aurelius, cautious in such company, often chose silence over speech. He wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." But this silence was not only for anger, it was also for deceit. He knew that words can be stolen, reshaped, turned against you. Silence was his shield. You notice the same truth in your own life. Someone corners you with leading questions, hoping to pin you in contradiction. Someone offers compliments that feel heavy with ulterior motive. If you respond too freely, your words are used as tools against you. But when you withhold, when you let the silence linger, their manipulation falters. The absence of your reply forces them to reveal their own intent. Scholars still debate the boundary between Stoic silence and cowardice. Is withdrawing your words always noble or sometimes avoidance? The answer lies in your purpose. If silence is chosen out of fear, it weakens you. But if silence is chosen with discipline to prevent your reason from being twisted, it becomes strength. The Stoics valued self-control, not timidity. Picture a general under scrutiny accused of betrayal by rivals who seek his downfall. If he protests wildly, he appears guilty. If he explains too much, his words are seized upon. But if he waits, offering no fertile ground for their traps, their schemes collapse. Silence turns their own weapons back upon them. You reflect on personal experiences, times when you argued against someone skilled in twisting your speech. The more you spoke, the more you felt caught. Yet when you fell silent, the trap dissolved and they stood exposed. It was not easy, silence never is, but in that choice you kept your integrity intact. Karma works here as unveiling. Manipulators thrive on entangling others. But when denied words to work with, they tangle themselves. Their hunger for control grows obvious, and those around them begin to see through their masks. You do not need to unmask them with accusation. Silence allows time to do it for you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Your silence in the face of manipulation is both obstacle and path. It blocks their attempt to sway you, and it directs you toward greater clarity. You walk away unbound, carrying not the burden of twisted arguments, but the peace of self-command. So you practice this discipline. When you sense manipulation, you pause. You let the silence stretch not as emptiness, but as strength. Your silence tells them, "I will not be a tool for your schemes," and in that stillness, their power fades. Section 6. You know the sound of grief. It is not loud, but heavy, a silence that presses into your chest. When loss comes, the instinct of many is to cry out, to speak endlessly of the pain, or to demand answers from the universe. Yet the Stoics teach you something different. There is dignity in quiet endurance. To carry sorrow without complaint is itself a form of courage. Seneca once wrote to a grieving friend, "What need is there to weep for parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." His words cut deep, for they remind you that suffering is not an exception, but part of the human condition. But instead of endless lamentation, the Stoics counseled restraint, not the denial of grief, but the mastery of how it is expressed. You picture Marcus Aurelius during the Antonine Plague, watching countless citizens, soldiers, and even friends perish. His own children were taken by illness. How easy it would have been for him to collapse in despair, to curse the gods, or shout his anguish to the Senate. Yet his meditations reveal only quiet reflection. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. His silence in grief was not indifference. It was reverence for the brevity of life. You feel this in your own times of loss. People may urge you to speak, to share, to release your pain through words. But you discover that silence itself can be a companion. When you sit quietly, the weight of grief rests without multiplying through endless retelling. You learn that words cannot repair what is broken. They can only circle it. Silence instead lets you sit with the truth of impermanence, neither clinging nor denying. Philosophers debate whether silence in grief is healthy or harmful. Some argue that unspoken sorrow festers, while others insist that speech can become a distraction from the deeper work of acceptance. The Stoic way is balanced. You acknowledge grief, but you do not let it control your tongue. You bear it with composure, knowing that all things return to the earth. Imagine a Roman mother, her son lost on the frontier. Neighbors expect wailing, public mourning, perhaps curses against fate. But she remains composed. Her tears quiet, her posture steady. People whisper that she is cold. Yet those who know her see strength. She honors her son, not by collapsing, but by living with dignity in the face of loss. Her silence is not absence of love, but its deepest form. You reflect on your own endurance. There were moments when you cried out, demanding to know why. And there were moments when you simply sat, allowing the silence to embrace you. In that stillness, something subtle happened. You began to sense that grief softens not because it vanishes, but because you stop fighting it. Karma here is not punishment or reward. It is the quiet balance of nature. Death comes to all, and silence honors that truth. Those who wail at fate find themselves exhausted, while those who sit in quiet acceptance find a strange resilience. The silence becomes a shelter, allowing life to continue with steadier steps. Marcus, walking through the darkened corridors of the palace after another loss, may have whispered only to himself, "Do not despise death, but accept it as one of the things which nature wills." You take these words with you. They remind you that silence in grief is not empty. It is filled with remembrance, filled with endurance, filled with the calm courage of one who accepts the path all must walk. So when grief finds you again, you practice this quiet endurance. You sit with the silence, and in it you discover strength that no words could ever give. Section 7. You have seen how silence steadies you in anger, in insult, in gossip, in grief. Now you discover another form of silence, one tied not to pain, but to patience. There are times when speaking too soon or too often clouds the truth of who people really are. If you wait quietly, time itself does the revealing. Epictetus told his students, "If you would be a reader, read. If a writer, write. If you would be wise, keep silent." The wisdom hidden in this is that silence often gives space for reality to unfold. When you withhold judgment, when you do not rush to speak, the masks others wear begin to slip. Imagine Marcus Aurelius sitting with his generals listening to conflicting reports of war. Some boasted of victories, others excused their failures, each one seeking favor. He could have interrupted, challenged, or praised. But Marcus often remained silent, watching carefully, letting their words expose their hearts. In the end time revealed who sought glory and who sought truth. His silence was not ignorance, it was discernment. You see the same truth in your own life. When you meet someone new, the temptation is to speak, to fill silence with your own story, to demand theirs in return. But if you wait, if you listen without rushing, their character begins to reveal itself in subtle ways. How they treat the quiet moments. How they react when there is nothing to gain from you. How their patience or lack of it shines through. Your silence creates space for truth to emerge. Philosophers argue whether Stoicism promotes passivity, whether waiting in silence is merely letting life pass by. Yet the Stoics never taught inaction, they taught timing. Silence here is not retreat, but strategy. By not pressing, not forcing you, allow virtue and vice to show themselves naturally. As Seneca wrote, time discovers truth. Think of a Roman senator accused of corruption. He protests loudly, insisting on his innocence, drowning the chamber with words. Another, also accused, speaks little, letting his life and conduct stand as testimony. Over weeks and months, who he truly is becomes clear. Words fade, but actions remain. Silence in this way proves stronger than argument. You reflect on your own past, remembering how often you tried to force clarity too soon, demanding answers, insisting on explanations, pressing for certainty. Yet when you let silence and time do the work, you discovered the truth more fully. People revealed themselves in ways they never would have if you had filled the air with noise. Here karma operates like water. It wears away stone not by force but by patience. Those who pretend cannot pretend forever. Those who deceive eventually contradict themselves. Your silence gives them the room to reveal what they would have hidden, and time delivers you the gift of clarity. Marcus in his meditations reminded himself, if someone shows you who they are, accept it. But do not be surprised. He knew that silence and observation were the keys to this acceptance. You hear his words now guiding you to hold your tongue, to watch, to wait. So you practice patience. When you are tempted to demand truth, you instead hold silence. When you feel the urge to expose another, you wait. And slowly you see that silence is not empty. It is a canvas on which time paints the reality of those around you. Section 8. You have felt the sting of injustice, that sharp sense that something wrong has been done, and that words might fix it if only they were sharp enough. Yet the Stoics whisper to you, sometimes silence is the sharper weapon. Not because you ignore injustice, but because you refuse to let it draw you into its chaos. Silence becomes a form of resistance, an anchor against the storm. Marcus Aurelius endured injustice even as emperor. Betrayals in the Senate, conspiracies among generals, merchants exploiting the suffering of the poor during plague, all of these pressed against his sense of justice. He could have raged, thundered in speeches, cursed his enemies by name. But his meditations show restraint. The best way of avenging yourself is not to become like the wrongdoer. Injustice tempts you to mirror it, to fight corruption with corruption, cruelty with cruelty. Silence shields you from becoming the very thing you oppose. You see this mirrored in your own time. Someone lies about you at work or treats you unfairly. Your voice rises in your throat, ready to unleash anger, to demand retribution. Yet you also see how shouting might reduce you to the same bitterness. Silence here is not surrender. It is a refusal to be remade in the image of the unjust. You choose instead to let karma or the slow turning of events uncover what is hidden. Philosophers debate whether Stoics believed in pure silence against injustice. Some argue they risked passivity, that injustice grows when unchallenged. Others note that the Stoics valued justice as one of their 4 great virtues, and silence for them was not inaction, but restraint. You act where you can, but you do not waste your words where they cannot reach. Action is measured, speech is deliberate, silence is often the stronger stand. Imagine a Roman slave wronged by his master, accused falsely of theft. If he protests endlessly, he only invites punishment. If he stays silent, waiting, karma plays its part. The true thief is discovered, the injustice collapses under its own weight. His silence was not approval, but survival and, in time, vindication. You reflect on your own life. How often did you rush to correct every injustice only to find yourself drained, consumed, or ignored? Contrast that with the times you stayed silent, letting your actions, your patience, your integrity speak instead. More often than not, the truth surfaced, and those who wronged you were revealed without your voice having to lift. Karma here is slow but certain. The unjust build their power on deception, and silence refuses to help them hold it. When you do not argue, do not shout, do not lend your energy, their scaffolding begins to fall. The silence you keep becomes a mirror, and eventually they face their reflection. Marcus wrote to himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. These words remind you that silence is not indifference. It is a way of living justice without being consumed by the noise of injustice. Your deeds, not your protests, carry the greater weight. So when you face injustice, you hold your silence not because you are powerless, but because you know power lies in what endures. You refuse to be reshaped by anger. You let karma and the order of things carry what words never could. And in that silence, you discover a justice deeper than argument, the justice of living rightly, even when the world does not. Section 9. You have walked through silence in anger, insult, gossip, grief, and injustice. Yet now you come to the most subtle form of silence, the one you must keep before your own ego. For the hardest voice to quiet is not the voice of others, but the one inside that longs to boast, to prove, to display. Silence here becomes humility, and humility becomes freedom. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that he was just a man, though crowned with the title of emperor. Soon you will have forgotten all things. Soon all things will have forgotten you. These words strike you with their starkness. Imagine holding the world's most powerful throne and still whispering to yourself that you are dust. Marcus practiced silence before his own ego, resisting the temptation to trumpet his victories or cling to his reputation. His meditations are filled with warnings against self-importance, a daily battle not to speak from pride. You feel this battle in yourself. When you succeed, the desire to announce it burns bright. When you are praised, you want to echo it, to tell others what they may not yet know. Yet the Stoics remind you, boasting is not strength, but hunger. The louder you speak of yourself, the more fragile your identity becomes, dependent on the echo of others. Silence instead roots you in what is real, the deed itself, unadorned, needing no trumpet. Philosophers still debate whether Stoicism encouraged too much self-effacement. Some argue that sharing your achievements can inspire others. Others insist that silence guards you from vanity. The balance lies in intent. Are you speaking to uplift, or only to elevate yourself? Silence becomes the truest test. If your words are not necessary, if they do not serve virtue, then silence keeps you clean of ego's stains. Picture a Roman general returning from victory. The crowd cheers, his soldiers chant his name, the Senate heaps honors upon him. Yet instead of boasting, he lowers his gaze, offering thanks to the gods, letting silence accompany him through the triumphal arch. His restraint does not dim his greatness, it magnifies it. The absence of boast makes his dignity shine brighter. You recall your own moments of temptation. When you achieved something rare, you wanted to display it. But the times you stayed quiet, letting others notice in their own way, you found that their recognition carried greater weight. Silence amplified your actions where boasting would have cheapened them. Karma here is subtle. The one who boasts too often invites envy and doubt. Their words circle back to trap them, for pride always overpromises. Silence, on the other hand, allows your actions to grow quietly. In time, recognition finds you without your pursuit. The balance of the universe favors humility. Those who shout fade quickly, those who wait in silence endure. Marcus wrote, "Do not waste the remainder of your life talking about what a good man should be. Be one." You hear this as a direct challenge. Instead of proclaiming your virtue, you live it quietly. Instead of boasting of victories, you continue your work. Instead of feeding ego, you let silence keep you grounded in what matters, the practice of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. So you choose silence before your ego. Not as denial of your worth, but as protection from pride's corruption. You do not need to announce every step of your journey. Your silence becomes a mirror of strength, reminding you that the greatest victories are those lived, not spoken. Section 10. You arrive at the final form of silence, the one that requires the most trust. It is the silence that lets karma or fate or the unfolding order of the universe do what your words never could. You feel the weight of this. Your instinct tells you to argue, to fight, to force life into fairness. Yet the Stoics counsel patience. The balance of things is greater than your voice, and silence leaves space for it to work. Marcus Aurelius wrote with resignation and hope, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. These words remind you that your own judgments are limited. You see a fragment of the story, not the whole. When you stay silent, you admit that reality itself is wiser than you are. And in that humility, you step out of the way and let time reveal what words cannot. Think of the enemies Marcus faced, political rivals who slandered him, generals who resisted him, even his own son, Commodus, whose future threatened to undo his legacy. Could Marcus silence them all with decrees? Perhaps. But he chose often to endure, to wait, to trust that the flow of time would judge them more accurately than his tongue ever could. And indeed, history remembers him with reverence, while many who opposed him are forgotten. Silence gave him victory without battle. You see this mirrored in your own life. You have encountered those who wronged you, lied about you, underestimated you. Your words could not have changed them, nor forced justice. But when you stepped back, when you chose silence, you found that time itself spoke louder. Their behavior caught up with them. Others began to see what you had seen. Karma, whether you call it that, or simply the law of cause and effect, moved quietly but surely. Philosophers debate whether Stoicism aligns with karma at all. Stoics spoke not of mystical balance, but of nature, of logos, of a universe that unfolds with order. Yet what others call karma, the Stoics might call the natural return of cause to consequence. Words cannot speed it. Silence allows it to happen. Picture a merchant in Rome who cheats his customers. If you confront him with words, he denies and argues. If you remain silent and refuse to trade in time, his dishonesty destroys him. His reputation crumbles, his wealth vanishes. Your silence did not create this justice, it simply trusted that justice in its own time would arrive. You remember moments when you tried to control outcomes with speech, with arguments, with explanations. You grew weary, frustrated, unheard. And you recall other times when you stepped back, choosing not to argue, not to fight. Months later, the truth surfaced. Silence had accomplished what your words could not. Marcus whispered to himself, "Do not be overheard complaining, not even to yourself." In this you hear the essence of Stoic silence. It is not only the absence of noise, but the presence of trust. A trust that life balances itself, that time reveals that your task is only to live with virtue. So you arrive here at the quiet acceptance that silence itself is action. Not action of the tongue, but action of the soul. You hold steady, you let go, you trust the order of things. And in that silence, karma moves, whether you call it fate, providence, or nature itself, carrying justice in ways you could never force with words. Now the pace softens, the voice eases, and you let the images fade into stillness. Picture yourself once more in that Roman courtyard, the light dimming the streets quiet. You feel the weight of the marble around you, cool, unmoving, and timeless. This is where the Stoics stood centuries ago, holding silence, as if it were a companion rather than a void. You reflect on the 7 times silence became your ally in anger, in insult, in gossip, in truth, in manipulation, in grief, in patience, in injustice before your ego, and when karma itself needed space. Each moment was not emptiness, but fullness, a choice to let stillness carry more strength than words. Your breath slows as you recognize that silence does not mean doing nothing. It means trusting yourself enough to step back. It means choosing dignity when others choose noise. It means remembering that words may pass, but character endures. Silence lets your deeds, your patience, and the balance of the universe speak on your behalf. In the fading light, you sense how silence protects you from your own impulses, from the traps of others, from the weight of grief, from the vanity of ego. And in that protection, it does more than shield. It heals. It allows you to move through the world with steadier steps, unburdened by the need to answer every voice. So now, as you let go of this reflection, you carry with you a quieter strength. One that does not need to shout, one that trusts the unfolding of time, one that knows silence is not weakness, but wisdom. You rest in that calm, the way Marcus once did, knowing that to say nothing is sometimes the most powerful act of all.